Hi, everybody. It's Dr. Laura, and welcome to the podcast, Connect My Brain. Okay, today I'm going to talk to you about an idea of why I see childhood development so complex. And today, there are so many things that are impacting child development. Now, if you've been paying attention to Robert Kennedy Jr. and MAHA movement and things of that nature, you know that there's a new conversation. And we are talking more openly about things like acetaminophen. We are talking openly about vaccines. And we are talking more openly how we're figuring out for the first time. It's not really the first time for some of us, but yes, it just seems like medicine is 20 years behind the schedule, but we're having the conversation. And I am very grateful that we're having the conversation. I always stand on the principle that you should make the decision for yourself and for your children what you want to do with any type of intervention. And that's even coming here. You know, as a chiropractor, I have a program. It's very well-rounded. We have a 3-tier approach, mechanical, chemical, brain. And part of that program is a chiropractic adjustment. You know, unfortunately, I don't feel like my profession has done a great job of really educating people on what it is that we do. And when you have some operations that are, posting a $25 adjustment, I think it really tears down the reputation and the professionalism of chiropractic. And I, for one, love being a chiropractor. I literally feel like it saved my life. After my first child, I had a situation where my back completely locked up. And my baby was only 6 months old at the time. I couldn't walk. And I didn't know a lot about chiropractic back then. I had had a very aggressive and traumatic labor and delivery with my child. And it ended up being a C-section, which unfortunately, I don't feel like I got the best medical care in the way that they did the incision on my abdomen. They literally just pulled all the tissue together and stapled it. And now it's like I have a cliff. And oftentimes, I can almost feel the way I describe it. It feels like a plate of glass goes from my lower abdomen all the way back to my sacrum. And that's part of the bony pelvic structure that you sit on. And I've had to even work continuously on that because of the amount of scar tissue that I actually have. But back when my child was 6 months old, my back completely locked up. I could not walk. The idea of having anybody ever cut me open again, it just was not going to happen. And I went to a chiropractor. She was wonderful. She saw me every single day. I had a herniated disc. She worked on me. And it really helped me understand the value behind this particular intervention, a chiropractic adjustment, because it impacts quality of life. Anything does, especially when it is physical. But I had another trauma in 95 where I got hit. Now I'm in chiropractic school. But I got hit. A woman, unfortunately, was having a heart attack as she was driving down the road and she hit me. My Jeep crashed into an embankment. My seatbelt failed and I literally went through the windshield and I looked like a raccoon afterwards. And then I had a dent in my leg. But that was another trauma to my physical body, which I tore a muscle in my shoulder. Even to this day, I do not have full range of motion of my right arm. And that is sending a message up to my neck, which is interfering with the input even to the muscles around my eyes. So I can actually see better out of my left eye than my right eye. And Dr. Zielinski, who I've had on my podcast before, you can go and check out that recording. She's helping me understand how those neck muscles even impact how you see. So when we talk about vision, there's visual acuity, looking through glasses or not needing glasses. And then there's how you see. So if there's an asymmetrical load on my eyes, it's going to change the perception of how, in quotes, I see. So I've had very good experiences with understanding that physical part of maintaining the mobility in my body. And it was because of chiropractic that as I started as a traditional chiropractor and it just seemed like kids flooded to me, I got very interested in children and I had very interesting cases and I have very interesting cases today. And I feel like that's one of the things that God decided he was going to really use me for was a clinician and to be able to handle really tough cases. I feel like I'm a little mini Sherlock Holmes and I can pull things apart. So that's what I mean by solving childhood complexities, because every child is different. There's so many people talking about pediatrics today. There's a lot of chiropractors that talk about pediatrics today. There's a lot of people that do have extended credentialing. And it's just really important that you find the right fit for yourself or for your child. So for me, chiropractic really helped me break down what I learned in school about how the human body works. And then how was I going to use those resources to be able to break down what was going on for a child? And so in chiropractic, we talk about that there's going to be this interruption in communication between the brain, the spinal cord, and the rest of the body. And it might show up like I was talking about the neck muscles, because all of those muscles are attached. The neck muscles are attached to my shoulder muscles, are attached to my rib cage. And there's fascia, which is going to create like this safety net around all of your muscles. And they all play a part. And then what happens to the movement? So I have really good range of motion with my left arm and I don't have good range of motion with my right. So there's a different movement pattern on one side of my body as compared to the other. And that's going to create a feedback to the rest of the body, but also to the brain. I've talked before on other podcasts about this concept called a homunculus. And you can look this up. We put a link almost in every podcast for the homunculus. I just absolutely love it because it gives you a visual picture that we already know and have known for a very long time. We don't have to wait 25 years for somebody to figure this out. We've already been past 25 years. That the whole body is mapped out on the brain. So if I move my right arm, my left side of my brain is helping me do that and vice versa. So movement is absolutely imperative. And that's what leads you to this idea of the neurology. You can't move without neurology. You can't send signals from your body to your brain without neurology. So we know neurology as well, but we never limit it to just one part of the body because we know it's an orchestra. And then there's this chemical piece. Just like I said, my 3-tier approach is mechanical, chemical, brain. So the chemistry, the body's chemistry. If I have this really bad scar tissue, it's actually gotten much better as far as what I'm going to say next. But I used to get unrelenting piriformis pain 2 to 3 times a year. And what piriformis is a muscle, and it's on the glutes or the bottom, and the scar tissue over time, what it was actually doing was wrapping itself around incredibly small nerve roots, the neurology. And when you reach a threshold of whatever, maybe I was sitting too much, maybe my asymmetrical load, but you reach thresholds with different things in your body. And then it's like, this is all it takes for the bucket to tip over. And so then I would get unrelenting piriformis pain. And I have to say, I don't even think I had it this year. So I work my scar tissue. So what I'm trying to do is to minimize an inflammatory reaction. And that's a lot of what we talk about with chemistry, is the inflammatory process. If our bodies carry too much inflammation for a variety of reasons, like, now lots of people talk about the methylation pathway, MTHFR. There's some of those genetic patterns that yield a high predisposition to inflammation problems. It could be your diet. It could be things that you're doing that really are not benefiting your health, like too much alcohol, nicotine, pouches, chewing it, vaping, whatever the case may be. There's so many things out there. I wouldn't even know how to list them all. Maybe it's your diet. So there's a lot of things that absolutely influence that chemistry. And then there's also not just what you're going through, but you really do carry a long history of influence on your system. And I really want to highlight this point today in our conversation, because it is something that is well researched. And in fact, I'll put a couple of research articles in the show notes that help you know that we know that you are influenced generationally as well as epigenetically. So what passes down from long-term exposures and I think we just really need to start with that word stress. Because stress is mechanical, chemical, emotional. So mechanical stress, that could be any kind of alteration in movement, in muscle fibers, chemistry. My grandfather, my mother's father, he worked on the DuPont plant in Charleston, West Virginia, which unfortunately I have been there many times because that's where my parents were from. And I don't feel like that's a high quality of health. And that was one of the reasons why I moved my mom to Georgia about 3 years ago. So the environment that you live in is going to influence how those cells are going to work. And that's why, looking at things like family history are so valuable to people like myself, because even if it's not in the immediate, wonder if it is somewhere down the line. And now you can actually test for these genes. They're called de novo genes, DENOVO. And these are being influenced from the ancestry of the family line, as well as epigenetics. And what do we mean by epigenetics? The word epi, EPI, means it plays on the genes. So genes are not just like an on-off switch. They have switches, but they're also influenced. And some of these influences will turn things on and turn things off. So it's not enough to just look at the immediate relationship. If we're talking about a child, it's not just the immediate relationship of that child's mom and dad, but it is the relationship from the whole family line. I believe that this level of science has really come about really because of autism. We had this explosion in the 80s, and it's just gotten higher and more since that time. And so, unfortunately, a lot of traditional medical care, especially big pharma, they want to believe that everything is influenced by a bad gene. And that's just not the case. And so what we have to do is we have to say, okay, well, what else is going on? And I may have mentioned this in another podcast, but I was watching a presentation that was even talking on jumping genes. And it's a scientist that actually looked at corn and noticed some ears of corn came out with all yellow except a few browns, a few purples. And I'm sure you've seen that. So what made that happen? And from her research, that became known as the jumping gene, that sometimes based on the environment, internal or external, it was changing the message, and the message jumped into another part of the cell. And so it had a different outcome. So these de novo genes, to me, they're like that ear of corn with brown spots and purple spots. And kind of think of the situation that maybe leads you to listening to my podcast is I like to talk about very complex issues and just offer another perspective. Okay, so let's think about these de novo genes for a minute. One of the ways that I can express this is by sharing a case. Do you have any idea how they actually found the MTHFR gene? Now, gene and de novo genes, we're going to be like two different categories right now, okay? So MTHFR is a gene, chromosome influenced, but the way that they found that was women having chronic miscarriages. So I know a case where a woman had multiple pregnancies and not one survived, while siblings of this woman had babies. So I'm going to kind of put a little capsule on that, like an outlier. Why could some of the family members, immediate family members, have babies, but one could not? This is where looking at what's called genomics gives you a different representation of this individual. And that is incredibly powerful. So I believe that since the wave of autism, there has been more research done as trying to explain the why behind why do some children get exposed to acetaminophen, vaccines, poor diet, lots of social issues, whatever the case may be, but they don't get a diagnosis of autism, and why others do. Very interesting. Maybe there is something in that individual blueprint that's very different than anybody else in the family. Or even maybe a couple of them are similar, but they're still not these exact things that are just given directly from mom and dad. This testing is, to me, light years ahead of what we can possibly do and understand on individuals. Why does a program that I put together here at Connect My Brain, mechanical chemical brain, why on so many, it just moves right through it and they do so well, and we can get to this conclusion of therapies and care, etc. And then there's others that do not. And so we are now offering this testing here at Connect My Brain. And I'm very excited about it because it's a personal blueprint of the individual that says about this individual, these are your unique factors. And going one step further, actually 2 steps further, it will actually tell us what supplements will actually work for this individual. And if medications are needed, what medications? And this to me is a huge area. I can't tell you how many times I've heard from families with very dramatic things going on when their child was put on some type of medication. It either seemed to not work or it made it worse. Wonder if it just doesn't match their blueprint. So this concept is so powerful. I really love the concept of blueprint. I do a lot of speaking professionally, and that is the concept I try to bring to other providers, is about understanding the unique blueprint of anybody that you see and how it influences so many different parts. So let me give you an example. Well, first I want to highlight a couple of things. Since I've been in practice for 30 years, okay? Since this time, and I really am trying to impress upon a point that I think things just take too long for the authoritative figures like government and big pharma and medicine in general to believe something. But I think it just takes too long. And I think you've got to have resources for yourself that you trust, and you need to take a look at it and don't wait, because the things that I think about are, for example, red dye 40 was banned this year, right? And it might have been red dye 6. I can't remember if it was 6 or 40. I'll make sure I figure that out and I'll put it in the show notes. I think it was 40. But they knew this for 35 years. There was research coming out 35 years ago saying, we think this may cause cancer. How many people has this impacted their life, taken their life, and we've waited 35 years for it? Fluoride has been banned in some areas. It should be banned everywhere. It's a neurotoxin, and it has 3 places it can go: water, your teeth, and the toxic waste dump. You don't need to use fluoride. This is a neurotoxin and impacts the IQ of anybody, like aluminum deodorant, but it's not banned yet. We've already touched on Tylenol. Vaccines have not been studied properly. That came out this year. Okay. Now, what we have is autism is increased by 300%, 1 in 36. California actually reports 1 in 18. 4 out of 10 kids are depressed. 1 out of 5 kids are obese. 1 out of 5 kids have suicidal thoughts. 1 in 6 kids have developmental delay. 1 in 10 kids are anxious. 1 in 10 kids are diagnosed ADHD or ADD. 1 in 12 kids have asthma. 1 in 13 kids have allergies. 1 in 285 kids are diagnosed with cancer by age 29. Something's wrong. Something is wrong. So when I talk about complex issues, I'm going to leave in your mind a thought mechanically, chemically, and brain, because that's the way I resolve my blueprint, as I put it into those 3 categories. A young man comes in, 13 years old, ask him to do a jumping jack. The arms move and the legs stay together and he just jumps straight up and down while the arms are moving in that typical jumping jack position. Would you say that that is a mechanical problem? I asked the child to put their foot out front, and all they do is repeat what I said. Can I process that information? A jumping jack helps us understand what's going on with the integration of neurology, movement, muscles, the ability to move the upper body one way and the lower body another way. When you come into the world, you are lifting your head. You will then, over time, get into your upper trunk, then your middle trunk, then your lower trunk, and then your legs. Your legs actually have to sync up with your upper body, meaning your brain's got to create an orchestration and pull it together. If I'm 13 years old and I can't do that, I am not getting the right message to my brain. I'm getting faulty information to my brain. Faulty information wires the brain up in a faulty pattern. Let me ask you this. Is a strep antibody test result coming back at 2,000 units per milliliter and streptolysin O coming back at 970 units per milliliter? Is that a complex issue? When the normal ranges, at least for me, are under 130. People really still believe that it's perfectly okay to have strep. And then, of course, my kid has strep. He's had it multiple times. That means that strep is circulating in there. And strep is pretty intelligent. It will literally mutate, change its form, and it can end up in the brain. This is now well known and associated with the acronym of PANDAS, Pediatric Autoimmune Neurodevelopmental Acquired Syndrome. And then there is now the shortened one, PANS, still an autoimmune storm, but generated by other chemistry issues, like what have you had in the past? Have you had pneumonia, hand, foot, mouth, cytomegalovirus virus, Epstein-Barr, just to name a few? We can't trigger the immune system without impacting the neurological system and the function of the brain. And then it is the brain. If mom and dad go into pregnancy without really planning this event, and what does that mean to plan? Planning means that I took a moment and I did labs on myself so that I could see my state of health. So I would know if I needed to work on something before I started manufacturing a life. And granted, again, there's no judgment. Who really talks about this stuff? I know I do. I have been for years. I believe as a young couple, you should take at least a year, if not two, to prepare your body to have a baby. You need to know what's going on in there so that you can bring about the best level of health possible. I think today what I've heard more and more with young people is that they're actually scared to have babies because of those other statistics I was reading to you. Everybody's talking about how kids are just not growing up in the way that we would expect them to grow up. And you might get scared, but you can work through this. You can look at your chemistry and you can figure it out and you can clean things up. That's what we do here at Connect My Brain. We work with that whole person. I personally love labs because it's my little Sherlock Holmes moment. It tells me what's going on inside. You can't always see that on the outside. And even if you've already had your child, okay, so we start the same thing with them. Let's take a look so that we understand what are the patterns that they were born with? What are the possible generational patterns that they were given? And what are the epigenetic changes that are going to make the health of that individual susceptible? Please don't wait. It is so important that if you've been asking yourself, I wonder if something is going on, don't wait. We have been so inundated by toddlers. And I kind of knew this would happen after COVID because the toddlers, the kids that are toddlers now, they were either conceived in COVID, born in COVID, affected during COVID. And their development was already being identified as delayed. So let's not wait. And regardless of the age of your child, there is always something that you can do. But the longer you wait, the pattern becomes more chronic. And then, yes, it becomes harder to correct. But if we dive in, we can work together in order to make the changes necessary so that you can start to restore health. That's the beauty of the human body. That is probably the greatest impact of the education that I received to become a chiropractor is I was educated on how the human body worked. And I was then intrigued to learn more. And from that platform, it went into now I teach in those arenas so that I can bring a new perspective, a new thought pattern to what we can do in order to make the necessary changes to restore health, neurological function, development, longevity into each and every individual that we serve. Now, maybe this is the first time you've ever heard my podcast. I encourage you to go over to the website, Connect My Brain. You can contact me. I return every call. You can look at a few options that we have. We have the podcast. We have the app. We have Truth Bombs on YouTube. But we also have what's called the C&B membership. And in that membership, it's a very modest price, and you can dip your toe in and begin to learn more about Connect My Brain. It's over on the tab that says how to work with me. And then maybe from there, as you get to know me, you might bring your personal situation or your child's personal situation to Connect My Brain and allow us to help you on this journey of restoring health. Thank you so much for tuning in today. We love reaching out to our community, the world. Be blessed.